So we're live. We're streaming live. That's amazing. I'm quite surprised. Technology worked for me for a change. So hello anybody that's already out there watching. What we're going to be doing in about 10, maybe a bit less minutes time is to be reading a bit of this, The Bucket. Oh, look, that's strange. On my computer, that comes up as backwards. It's written backwards. I don't know if that is for you. So if you want to say hello, say hello. We're just getting ready to start the story. What I'll do to begin with is to read back the blurb so that people know what's going on. Hello, that's Sarah, daughter. She's written nope. Don't know why that is. Nope, watch Sarah. Who can tell? So look, in the meantime, what I'll do is show you another couple of things I've written. So there's the bucket, which is this, and there's the bag, which is this, the sequel. And it's a bit kind of, as you can see, a bit thicker and more exciting. I've also written another 3 books, 2 more of these. So there's the sequel, and there's part 1 and part 2 of the 3rd one, which is I got carried away, to be honest. For anybody who's watching this, I got carried away writing the first the first part of the 2 parts of the second book. It's quite confusing, really. So we've got the bucket, the bag, and the box. And I was wondering why it was taking me so long to write the box, and it was basically because I've written it in 2 parts. So there's part 1 and part 2 that are both about as long as that one. So if anybody really likes a good adventure story and they like it to be quite exciting, that's what I do. I also write other smaller books, which are things like this. I Want a Hippo. So for me, I don't know if you can see it. You're getting this, it's brilliant. But for me, the writing's backwards when I'm looking at that. I Want a Hippo. And it's about a little girl who has temper tantrums and who wants a hippo when she sees one on TV, and I think is she on TV? I'll read it. But her mother says, "No, you can't have a hippo. That's nuts. Why would you want a hippo?" And of course, she has a bit of a meltdown. "You never give me anything I want. I want a hippo. You're horrible to me." And she ends up on the naughty step. That's pretty good. But then her mum does buy her a hippo, and it'll be interesting to see what happens after that. So let me tell you a bit about myself. I'm an author of children's books, obviously. I started life as a psychiatric nurse. I used to run... Hello, Sarah's put some weird stuff on. A smiley face. Oh, it's a crying face. Is that a crying face? I don't know. It's a laughing face. I can tell. I used to, so I started life as a psychiatric nurse, and then I started to look after my mother when I was a lot younger, because she got MS, and that was a tricky few years, good 8 years. But during that time, as being her carer, I started to run a theatre company. I went and did a BA Honours in Performing Arts and met some brilliant people, some wonderful people who are still friends of mine now. And we started up, me and Pauline Midwinter and Darryl Tester started up a theatre company called the New Route Theatre Company. And through that, I started writing plays, and we kind of honed our skills a little bit in acting, and we did some dreadful plays at the beginning and some brilliant plays right at the end. We used to take big Shakespeare plays, 16, 17 actors all around the place. In rural locations. It was fabulous. We had a lot of time. And then, of course, my kids came along. I met my wife around about the same time, 20 odd years ago. And then a few years later, the kids turned up. They didn't just arrive at the doorstep. That was there was some hard work involved in that coming to bear. And we got married 12 years ago. My other daughter is 11. Work that one out. And my second daughter is 14. So I started writing stories for them just for fun. But I didn't write them. We used to make them up. We played a story game that was called, well, 3 parts. You'd have to have a character, a thing, and a person. And then you'd have to make a story up from that. And we made all sorts of different stories up. One with the fish and chip monster, one the fat and the thin man at the lake, who swapped getting fat and thin. It was very odd, but it was lots of fun. And so I wrote. My eldest asked me to write one down for her, and so I did that. It was only a little one, and it was this one, funny enough. So I wrote that, and then my youngest said, "Well, where's mine? Where's my story?" And I said, "Well, okay. What do you want it to be about?" She said, because she was 6 at the time, and 6-year-olds, you know, they're lovely and evil in equal measures, I find. So she said, "I want it to be about a bucket." And I went, "Okay." And she said, "And it has to have a hole in it." I went, "Yeah, all right then. I think you'll find, dear Liza, that's been done." But no, she was insistent, so I started to write this little story, and it just grew and grew, and ended up with a full adventure, which is what I'm going to start reading to you very shortly. I'm kind of hoping that we get some people tonight. I'm guessing we're not going to get that many people because I haven't really put this out there, but that's okay, because the people that are listening tonight, if you'd share this, if you like it, then I'm going to do the rest of the book. So we'll do 4 or 5 chapters. Not quite sure. We'll see how that goes. And then my older daughter said, "Well, wait a minute. You wrote this for Rachel." Well, this is available on Amazon, by the way. And if you ever buy a book, buy a copy, do me a favor and leave a review. People always forget to leave the review. It's fine. So Sarah said, "Where's mine?" And I said, "Well, okay, I'll write one for you." But I thought, well, I've got to follow the theme, the bucket. I mean, it's an odd title, isn't it? It's an unusual title. So then I came up with the bag, and once again I started writing it, but the adventure just got longer and longer and longer and longer and longer. But not, hopefully, a moment passes without somebody going, "Wow." So there was that one. Then I've been asked to write also a storybook for kids who are losing their dog or their cat or their pet because of a change of circumstances. And I'm in the middle of doing that. I've kind of finished the story, but we're kind of putting that through the publishing process, along with the third 2 books that end the sequel of these. So there we go. What I'm going to do, I think, is I'm just going to go and check that nobody's going to come through the door while I'm reading to you folks, and then we'll take it from there. So I'm hoping that we'll get some shares in a short while. I don't even know what the time is. Oh, it's 19:02. Okay, so back in just a moment. Don't worry about the empty chair you just joined. Let's go with this. Okay, I'm back. Hello. All right, so we have another person joined us. Hello, other person that's joined us. We're kind of hoping that we'll get a few more people, but once I've finished doing the reading for tonight, if you want to share it so that other kids get to hear this, they can probably get this on catch up on the YouTube channel. So for those of you who are here, let's just read the blurb. Rachel's bucket has a hole in one side and a jewel in the other. When Rachel first pressed the jewel in the side of the bucket, she was just 4 years old. Smoke came out of it, and in the smoke 5 unicorns pranced lightly onto her hand and off again. It made her smile and cry at the same time. As her 10th birthday approaches, her world begins to change with the arrival of a mysterious silent boy with amazingly blue eyes. And parents that Rachel never sees. They move in next door and their house develops a green glow and has strange noises coming from it. That is when things started getting really odd. Remember, Minotaurs are ticklish. Okay, so let's get to the prologue. Okay, so I'm going to apologize to all the boys in the world right now for the first prologue, but things might change and pick up for them. We'll see how that goes. Rachel hated boys. There was no doubt in anybody's mind about this, and she made it absolutely clear that she wanted nothing to do with them. Show me a boy in my year, or even the year above me, that I can't beat in any subject, or outrun, or even outfight, and I'll show you a girl. Boys are stupid, clumsy, and irritating. Even the most stupid girl in my class is cleverer than any of the boys. Boys are utterly pointless. Then the silent boy with impossibly blue eyes moved in and arrived at her school, and everything turned really odd. Rachel loved her dad to bits, despite him being male, but even he was not as clever as she was when it came to playing Labyrinth. Well, not now that she was nearly 10, anyway. The embers of the fire were spluttering out as Rachel put her last tile in place and moved her piece into its final square. She loved this game, Labyrinth, and the way that each turn changed the landscape on the board entirely. 5-0, Dad. Are you letting me win? Her father looked at her quizzically. Should they have told her what was to come? He had asked himself the question over and over again. The answer was always the same: no. Why do we play games, Rachel? He asked. We've done this one, Dad, to have fun and not just to win. Her father sat back in his chair. Why do young animals play? Rachel thought for a while. To learn survival skills? Obviously. Although how boys learn anything is a mystery. Her father smiled. It's late. Time for your bed, young lady. School tomorrow. Rachel yawned. Oh, no. Oh, try harder next time, Daddy. Oh, I need more of a challenge. Her father raised one eyebrow. Cheeky man. Go on, skedaddle. Rachel headed out of the lounge. Night, Dad. She found her mother doing the family accounts in the kitchen. Good night, Mum. Her mother looked up from the papers arranged in neat piles around the table. Did you win again? Rachel smiled. Naturally. Good night, Mum. She headed upstairs as her father went into the kitchen. Rachel's mother looked up from the paperwork once more. She won again? Her father frowned. Yes, and I was really trying hard that time. Best we call Brian then, her mother said, putting down the papers and sighing. I'll get the bugle horn then, should I? Her father nodded, and Rachel's mother went to the cupboard under the stairs. When she came back into the kitchen, she asked, Do you want to do it, or shall I? Rachel's father gestured for her mother to do it. She lifted the horn to her lips and blew. No noise came from the instrument. Then she sat down and sighed. It's done. We just have to hope now. A long, long way away, in a far distant meadow, under a different sun of a different sky, a cobbler pricked up his furry ears and grinned. Play a game now, he said, and then scuttled off through the grass, chortling. Rachel the Intrepid had a bucket. She knew that other children preferred toys to play with, like princess castles, girls obviously, and Buzz Lightyear, boys obviously, and all manner of other silly stuff. She knew one boy who had a snake and another who had a whole collection of exotic snail shells. A girl who had a real rocket set and another who had an adventure castle that sang songs and had moving turrets, no less. Some who had iPads and some who had very expensive electronic stuff. But Rachel had a bucket, and that was better than any toy. Rachel didn't know where the bucket came from, but she remembered the first time that she used it, properly used it. It was a Monday, 4 years before in the summer. It had been raining, and it was the day before her first day at school. She should have started school on the Monday, but much to the joy of her parents, the school had begun the term with a non-pupil day. Rachel had been a bit nervous about starting school, but excited too. So she was a bit sad at not being able to start on the same day children at other schools were starting. And that morning, her parents seemed a bit grumpy for no particular reason. Her dad had been moaning about them having 6 weeks off already, whoever them were. And her mum was complaining about not being able to start her new job that day. Nobody seemed happy that day. It was a glum day. Rachel decided to explore the garden again. They had a small garden that had one big bush in the middle, 2 trees that never flowered, and a garden shed. It also had grass, but Daddy said it was mostly moss and needed digging up. Rachel decided that today she would explore the shed. The shed was a bit dark and gloomy with spiders' webs and dirty tools, but she was, after all, Rachel the Intrepid, and wasn't scared of anything much. When Rachel opened the shed door, all was pretty much the same as it always had been. Dark, gloomy, webby. She went inside it and looked around at the rusty tools and wished the mummy and daddy were not so grouchy today. She had sat down on what Daddy had called the potting bench, looked up, sighed, and swung her legs back and forth. As she looked up, she noticed a metal bucket on the shelf that she had not noticed before. It caught her eye because one side of it was very shiny and one very dull and dirty. It was quite small, half the size of a normal bucket, in fact. So standing on a very much unused lawnmower gave her just enough height to pull the bucket off the shelf and catch it as it fell. She turned it around in her hands and thought to herself, you could do with a good clean on this side to make you shiny all over. Then maybe Daddy would see you and be a bit happier. So she took out an old rag out of a drawer and began to clean the bucket. It seemed a bit fancy for a bucket, a bit ornate. As she cleaned it, she let her mind wander, as one does, and began thinking about what she would prefer to be doing. At the age of 5, her thoughts naturally turned to the impossible and fantastical unicorns. She thought, right now, I would love to be playing with unicorns. She'd seen a unicorn on the school gates when she went to have her first visit to the school and had asked her dad about them. Mythical beasts, he said. That means they don't really exist. But they are supposed to bring good luck to whosoever sees one. Apparently, they like apples. It wasn't long before she noticed that under the grime on one side of the hole was a sort of glass jewel. It couldn't be a proper jewel, of course. Just one of those glass things that some people decorated ordinary objects with to make them seem more special. Nonetheless, she cleaned it and buffed it and took great pleasure in seeing it begin to sparkle through the dusty light. When it was as clean as she thought she could get it, she put down the rag and took a closer look. She noticed that the sort of jewel thingy seemed to be a bit loose, so she tried to press it back into place. But as she did so, she heard a click. The bucket made a purring noise and began to vibrate. Rachel nearly dropped it out of fright, but she was too intrigued to see what would happen next, if anything. What did happen next was what made the bucket hers. A sort of wispy smoke started coming out of the bottom of the bucket. It swirled in a most unsmoke-like way and wafted around in a circle. Rachel was fascinated. After laying it gently on the floor of the shed, it happened. In the smoke, there appeared to form 5 galloping unicorns. Within a few seconds, they all stopped galloping. They just stood in the smoke beside the bucket, looking at her. She put her hand into the smoke. One by one, the unicorns jumped onto and off of her hand. Each one whinnied as it pranced onto her palm. Rachel's eyes were wide in amazement. Their hooves felt like cool dancing raindrops in a summer rain. When the last unicorn left her hand, it joined the others and swirled into a line in the front of the bucket. All 5 unicorns reared up. When they came to the ground, one by one, put a foreleg out and bowed their heads. The smoke swirled again and seemed to get sucked back into the bucket. The jewel clicked out again. Rachel did something that she had never done before. She smiled and cried at the same time. When she realized this, she smiled and cried even more. It was wonderful. She just sat for a while thinking about what had just happened. Was it real? Lunchtime, she heard her father call from the back door. She carefully put the bucket back, taking extra care to hide the jewel side of it, and then covered it in an old rag. When she went back inside, she asked her father, "You don't really use the old shed, do you, Daddy? Can I have it as my den, please?" Her father looked at her mother and said, Yes, I think you can. Remember, Minotaurs are ticklish. You can use it as a study room when you get starting homework." As a 5-year-old, Rachel had not really understood the last 2 bits of that sentence, but was happy to have her own den. Now, Rachel was 4 years older, nearly 5 years, in fact. She had visited the bucket every time she could from then until now. She always thought that it would be wrong to tell anyone about the bucket because even she knew she was still regarded as a child. Someone would have taken it from her for some adult reason, so she kept it as her own secret. Each time she pressed the jewel, she would see an image of the thing that she was thinking of. Most and every time was a delight and a wonder. She would think of elephants, and elephants would appear. She would think of flocks of birds, and they would appear. Strangely, they looked a bit metal. Once, she tried to imagine what alien penguins would look like. Just for fun, of course. But sure as buckets of buckets, alien penguins appeared. They had antennae on their head and magnifying goggles and floated on a skateboard sort of thing. Instead of wings, they had arms and hands. One of them spoke to her and said this was all very interesting, as they had often wondered what a human child would look like. They commented on how difficult it must be to get around on such wobbly legs without a floater to stand on. Who would want a singing adventure castle or a collection of exotic nail shells when you could meet alien penguins? The other wonderful thing about the bucket was when she had a project in school about something like dinosaurs, the Tudors, she would go to her bucket and it would show her things that were really useful. It taught her so much about the subject she thought of that her teachers at her school thought that her reports would look at her reports and wonder if she had a supercomputer at home. She seemed to them to know things that even themselves didn't know about the subject, and they were supposed to be the teachers. The alien penguins were very helpful on the science projects. This bucket wasn't just incredibly helpful, it sort of felt a bit like a friend. Right now, though, as Rachel approached her 10th birthday, she found herself in a quandary. She had thought that everything in her life was perfect. She really enjoyed school and her after-school clubs. Mummy and Daddy were often tired and grumpy and seemed too busy working to play with her as often as she would like. She often found them just staring into space as if they're thinking of something or someone else, but she still felt much loved. She had lots of friends, even if some of them were a bit confusing, as other people often are, but most special of all, she had the secret bucket. Right now, things had changed. New people had moved into the house next door, and there was something odd about them, something not right at all. There was a mum and a dad, and a boy of her same age with amazingly blue eyes, and a dog. It was not a nice dog, it barked a lot, especially very early in the morning. Even though the family had lived next door for over a month now, Rachel had never seen the adults leave the house, or the dog. The little boy who had started at her school that term was quiet. Not quiet as in a bit sullen or moody, but quiet, silent, in fact. He simply never spoke. You never heard him either. He could be doing anything. Turn around and there he was, just watching, smiling. It was a bit creepy. Unlike some of the children that were a bit different at school, he didn't have a special teacher, which was odd. And even more odd was the fact that Rachel sort of liked him, even though he was a boy. In the playground, he seemed content enough to simply sit and watch other children playing, although she did have to help him out once, whatever his name was. That was the other odd thing about him. He'd been at school for 3 weeks. He was in her class, and she still couldn't remember his name. Even the teachers called him Dingy. He may have been a bit odd, but for some reason she warmed to him. He didn't run around shouting all day, and he sat in the classroom paying absolute attention to whatever the teachers were saying. For a boy, that was very odd. He had been standing in the playground watching the other children when some of the other older boys surrounded him and started taunting him and pushing him. He didn't smile then. It was mainly Robin McCracker. He was an older boy that lived in the house on the other side of the odd boy's house. He was a bully. Rachel did not like bullies, and she certainly didn't like Robin. She knew that Robin's father had disappeared 8 years ago, but there was no excuse for being horrible. Every class in the school had 1 or 2 bullies, girls and boys. She didn't like them either. She walked over and stood in front of the new boy. Robin, the bully, tried to push her out of the way, but Rachel's karate teacher had taught her a trick or two about bullies. So as Robin went to push past her, she stepped sideways and then stuck her leg between his. He fell over, landing squarely on his nose. "Oi, you little cow!" "Ah, right then." He stood up with his nose squashed and bleeding and went to push Rachel again. Rachel stood her ground this time, without taking her eyes from his, and shouted very loudly, "Robin McCracker has a big poo in his pants and it's really smelly." All of the other children in the playground turned around and looked at Robin. Robin turned bright red with embarrassment. "I have not," he said uncertainly. All the children started laughing and pointing at Robin. "You'll regret this, you little toe rag." Rachel kept looking him in the eye and said, "Don't bully other children, little children smaller than you then. Next time I'll tell the teachers and you'll get another black mark." Robin wasn't going to try and push her again, with everybody watching. He already had 2 black marks from teachers. A third would see him on a week's detention. He felt tears coming to his eyes and walked off, trying to look brave but feeling like a bit of a twit. Rachel turned to the strange, silent boy, her and Robin's joint neighbour. "Are you all right?" she asked. He said nothing, just smiled, gave her a hug, then he walked back into the school. "That boy is just odd," she thought to herself. His parents were just as odd. They seemed to shout a lot in angry voices and bang around a lot in their house. She hadn't actually seen them, but they sounded very gruff. Then there was the glow. You didn't notice it at first, but after a while, if you stared hard enough, you could see a very faint green glow coming out of the chimney at night, and a low humming. She did ask her father about it, but he just said that it must be a reflection from something close by, a light from somewhere making an optical illusion, and then had said, not everything you see will be real. She felt a little sorry for the boy. All in all, Rachel found her new neighbours to be, well, just odd. Now, see, we've done 20 odd minutes on there. So what I'll do is pick this up tomorrow night, about the same time, 7 o'clock, and we'll see how we go from there. I hope you've enjoyed it. As I say, these are all available on Amazon, and do leave a review. But good night, and thank you for joining me. See, I'm live, so I've got stuff coming up on my computer, recipes and things. See, I have this other thing. I love cooking. It's one of my things. I love cooking, playing guitar, and telling my children off for being a bit naughty. They're not really. They're pretty good kids. So there we go. All right. So thank you very much, and I will hopefully see you tomorrow evening. If not, I hope you enjoy this when you pick it up, whenever that is. Catch you later.